Okay, so we are ready to get started. We've got a big crowd today, so I didn't get a chance to welcome everybody. So I want to officially start the class and welcome everybody, especially anybody this is their first class. I think there were several people. So,
Trudy.
yep, Trudy, yeah, Beverly.
In my first class too.
Okay, that's fine. All right, great. Always glad to have new people here. Hope you enjoy the class and end up signing up for some other classes. Always good to have you. And and I see a lot of familiar faces as well. Always great to have people back that have been in the class before. Makes me feel at home to see familiar faces out there. All right. So my name is Wade Yarbrough, and I'll be the guide for this session on password managers. Before we get into the agenda, I've got a few housekeeping issues to go over. First, the session is being recorded. That is primarily for internal quality control purposes, but any participant can request a copy of the recording, and I'll show you how to do that at the end of class if you're not familiar with that process. Also, there's no marketing or other financial relationships between GetSetup and any of the products or vendors we'll talk about today. We are purely trainers, so all of our revenue comes from our training activities. I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone. We've got a big crowd here today, and we're all at home, so we know how that works. There's always some background noise. So please do make sure you know where your mute is and how to turn the mute off so that I can hear you when you ask a question or have a comment. I'm going to go ahead and also pull down a copy of the chat in case anyone is having trouble with their microphone and can't ask your question out loud. I will have the chat open, but especially with a big crowd, if everybody's using the chat, things go by faster than I can read them. So if your microphone's working, please just go ahead and unmute and ask your question. You don't need to raise your hand or get my attention. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. The pictures are on my side monitor, so sometimes I don't see them when I'm looking at my my other monitor. Okay, so with all of that, I think we're ready to get started. Let's take a look at the agenda and see what's on tap for the day. So we're going to talk about the problems with how we're currently storing our passwords. I think everybody knows there's a password problem, otherwise you wouldn't be here. We'll talk about what I call the gold standard of password management, what that looks like. That's kind of the high ideal that we should all be striving for. It's tough to get there. I'm not there yet, but it's just to kind of know what the ultimate goal is. We're going to spend a good bit of time talking about web-based or browser-based password managers versus what I call a true password manager. And we'll talk about how you install and use a password manager if you want to install one, what the steps are to get one installed. And then I'll do a short demo of one of the popular password managers just so you can see how it works. They all work slightly differently, but they all also have a similar approach. So I think sometimes seeing one in action makes a lot of the conceptual material we're going to be covering a little more concrete. All right, so a lot to get covered. Let's get started. The password problem. So once upon a time, you probably all remember, we had 2, maybe 3 different passwords that we used, and we logged into maybe 20 sites, maybe less. I know I had 2. I had one that was my secure password that I just used for my bank and credit cards and financial accounts, and then I had another one for everything else. A recent report found that most people now are using over 50 different passwords, and they're logging into around 200 different sites. So life has moved on. Our online life has gotten bigger and bigger, which makes the password problem get much bigger than it was back here. And according to a recent data breach investigation, they found that 80% of data breaches are caused by weak or reused passwords. So here they're talking about when some cyber criminal gets access to your passwords and then uses them to log into your other accounts and try and steal your money or steal your identity. And so one of the biggest problems, 80%, involve weak passwords and reusing passwords. So based on that, now the challenge really is to first use complex, secure passwords, not weak passwords. and then to not reuse passwords across multiple sites. Those are the two problems they found in the data breach report. We want to address those two. That to do that, it produces two problems. One is coming up with good secure passwords. We're not very good at that generally. We don't, in terms of thinking them up. We typically need some help. And we definitely need help remembering all those passwords. Because if you never reuse passwords and you're using 200, you're logging into 200 different sites, that would mean you'd need 200 different passwords. It's all challenged with the way we're doing it today for most people. And again, I'm going through this, a lot of this is kind of background material, so I'm going through it, fairly quickly, but if you have questions or you need me to repeat something or whatever, please just unmute and go ahead and ask your comment, make your comment or ask your question. So let's talk about how we're currently managing our passwords. A lot of people, I won't ask for a show of hands, but a lot of people are still using a paper notebook. They keep beside their computer where they write down their passwords, and they have some way to maintain it. It's getting hard with this many passwords, and now lots of sites force you to change your password at least once a year, sometimes now twice a year. So that's one of the problems. It's hard to maintain. Also, it's not always with you. So if you're at a friend's house, if you're at a hotel, if you're at a library, and you need to log into a site, you don't have your password with you, I hope. If you're taking that notebook around with you, that's an even bigger risk, because if you lose that notebook, someone's got the keys to the kingdom and they can get into all of your sites. So basically, as we're moving toward a true way to manage passwords, paper notebooks become unmanageable pretty quickly. The other way most people are storing passwords now, a lot of people, is using browser-based password managers. A lot of you are probably doing this and maybe don't even know where your passwords are going or what's happening. But if you're using any of the newer browsers, the first time you log into Facebook, it'll ask you, do you want me to save this password? And you probably thought that sounds like a good idea and say yes. And then the next time you go to Facebook, it'll either automatically plug in your username or password, or maybe it'll ask you, do you want me to enter your password for you? And you say yes, and so it loads it in. That's your browser-based password manager working. And it does provide a good service in that sense. It does store your passwords. It recognizes if you change your password. If I go into Facebook and change my password, it'll ask, do you want to save your new password? So it's doing a lot of the things you want a password management tool to do. But there's several problems with the browser-based password managers. One is that if you're using more than one browser for whatever reason, and lots of people have Windows on their laptop or desktop, but they may have an iPhone. So they're using Safari on their,
Before you go further, can you define for all of us what a browser is, and so therefore what a browser based? I mean,
yeah,
are you
good question.
referring
Thanks.
to the program that's in our iPhone or something else?
I'm talking about how you get to the internet. So your browser could be either Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, or if you're using an iPhone, it's Safari. So there are a number of different ones. But yeah, that's what you launch to get to the internet. Probably Chrome and Internet Explorer, which is now I think called Edge or something different, are the most commonly used ones. It's good question. Thanks for clarifying that.
What about Google?
Chrome is Google's browser. So right now I'm using Google Chrome.
Well, I just use Google, and I don't think I'm using Google Chrome. All I do is put Google and then.
But Google Chrome is what you're putting Google into. So when you first launch
so I'm using Google Chrome and don't even realize it.
You're using Google Chrome and don't even realize it.
Okay.
So you've got something down here that looks like this probably that you click, and that launches Google Chrome. Yeah. So to get to the internet, you have to launch a browser.
if she's got a Mac, she could be on Safari and she's just using Google as her search engine. And
You can do that. Yep. So you can use Google as your
I have
search
an
engine
Apple.
and use Safari. So, but yeah, whatever you are using to get to the internet, that is your browser.
if she has an Apple, she's probably automatically using Safari and not even knowing it.
I don't know what there's an icon for Safari, but I'm not sure what that looks like. But is everybody straight on browsers? I'm glad you clarified that, Melinda. 'Cause we're going to talk a lot about browser-based password managers, and so yeah, so kind of back to the point. If you only use one, so if you use Safari on your Mac and on your iPhone, and you've got it set to share. That works better if a lot of people though use multiple ones. I use 3 different ones, sometimes 4. So I use Chrome, I use Firefox, I use Internet Explorer on my desktop. Don't ask why I use 3, but I use multiple browsers. And then sometimes I use Safari on my iPhone. I also have Chrome on my iPhone as well. So I use 2 different browsers on my iPhone even. So if you're using multiple browsers, then they obviously don't share. If I enter a password in Chrome, it doesn't share it with Internet Explorer. It doesn't share it with Safari. So you basically have to store them in every browser you're using. So if you change your Facebook password in Chrome, you've got to go and manually change it again in Safari, etc. Does that make
Wait,
sense?
yeah, I'm just curious, why would you use multiple browsers? The only time I've ever had to use them, I'm a Mac user, so I've always used Safari, but there's only occasionally and not so much anymore. It used to be certain places were not, quote, Safari friendly, so you'd have to swap over to something else, but I'm not even running into that anymore. So why would someone use multiple browsers? Because it seems like that just complicates things as far as your passwords.
I do it a lot because when I around teaching, because Chrome is what I use for all my teaching and all my GetSetup stuff, and then I use something called Firefox for my personal stuff, and I'll have Chrome window open on one of my monitors. I have a dual monitor set up, and I got Firefox open on my other monitor, so I can have my personal email up on one side and my work email up on the other. So that's why I do it. But yeah, for most people, they pick one and stick with it. Other than that, there's probably not any good reason. There's not like there's certain things I only do on one browser and other things I only do on the other one. It's more so I can have both open doing different things at the same time. So that's one of the problems in a way. If you do use more than one browser, that is a problem. And the other problem with browsers is that it doesn't help you logging into the apps on your phone. So since these are apps and they all have passwords that I need, my browser-based password manager can't help me log into the apps on my smartphone. That makes sense? So with those limitations, and there are some additional limitations we'll talk about with browser-based ones, which kind of get into the security of them. They're easier to break into, but they're much better than the paper and pencil types of password management. And the other comment I'll make about them is that they are getting better all the time. I've been following them for several years, and they are getting more secure. They're becoming more like what I'm calling a true password manager. None of them are there yet, but some of them are getting some of the characteristics that they're missing. But before we move on, everybody's familiar now with what we're talking about, and you probably have used that where it pops up and asks you if you want to save a password, and you do. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Leanne.
Yeah, I use the Chrome on my laptop, and then I was thinking, just listening to you, that I should download Chrome onto my phone. But you say the phone will not fill in the passwords for me?
It was, if I'm using Chrome, it would, and I'm not even sure if that will work because I don't use that. But if I'm logging into Twitter, the fact that I've got a browser-based password over here is not going to help me log into Twitter because I'm not logging into Twitter through a browser on my phone.
Okay.
If I log into Twitter on my browser, it'll help me.
on apps, if you're using Mac or Apple and everything's saved in Keychain, then does Keychain save your what do you call it, logins for apps or not?
Yeah, I think it does. We'll talk about Keychain a little bit later.
Okay.
It's kind of in between the browser-based password managers and what I call a true password manager, which is where we're going next. So it doesn't qualify yet as a true password manager. It's missing some pieces, but it again is getting better all the time. So it's probably, I would say it's better than using a browser-based password manager, but not as good as a true password manager. And but I haven't used Keychain, so I don't have a lot, but I've got a link that I'm going to add to the email because it's come up in other classes. So I've got a link to an article in the email that will come out after the class that talks about Keychain and how it's working and what it does and doesn't do. So if you're interested in Keychain, there's an article that will go into more detail. So let's talk about true password managers. And a true password manager is a software application that's designed to store and manage passwords. That's really all that it does. It provides access on all devices and all browsers. So I use one called LastPass. It looks like this. It's one of many. There are a lot of good ones out there, but that's just the one I've chosen. But it'll work on all three of my browsers. It'll work on my iPhone. It works on my laptop. It works on my Kindle Fire tablet. So they'll pretty much work on any device in any browser you've got. It will generate secure passwords. If you remember, that was half of the problem. We use bad passwords. All your true password managers will generate a secure password for you. The browser-based password managers don't generate secure passwords for you. I don't think Keychain does either. I'm not positive about that. It works with apps on your smartphone or tablet.
I only found out because Deb in her safety on the internet, I mean on iPad and iPhone taught this. And yeah, Keychain will generate a password for you.
They will? Okay, all right, good. So that's why these are all changing rapidly, so it's hard to keep track of them. That's why I'm always a little guarded when I say something will or won't do something unless I've used it myself and can say with certainty. But I know that Keychain, based on the articles I've read about it, is getting better and better all the time. And it's Apple. You would expect it to get better. Apple's got lots of resources. So if it's not up to true password manager level, it's close, and it may be by now. But again, it works on logging into any of these apps. It'll help me do that. And it also utilizes a master password protection plan. And that's probably the biggest differentiator. At this point, I don't think maybe one of the browser-based password manager uses a master password. And I don't think it's even quite a true master password. So this is probably the biggest difference in terms of security. So we'll talk a lot about master passwords. Let's develop that a little bit. So what is a master password? A master password is a password used by the software management software to secure your other passwords. So your normal passwords are encrypted and stored in a file or a vault. And the master password is needed to log into the password manager, to get access to your vault, and then to unencrypt the passwords. Let me use an analogy. So if you have a box, a lockbox with a key, so you take your documents, you put them inside the lock box, and then you lock it with the key. That's kind of what the master password is. It's the key that you use to open and use something and then close it back. You can't get to the documents inside that box without the key. You can't get to your passwords in the vault without the master password. I got a graphic here that may or may not help make more sense. This is, but basically how it works. If I'm saving a password, I'm here on my browser, and I log into Facebook for the first time and create a password. It actually, it's encrypted, and basically the lock means encrypted. That means it's scrambling it in a way that you can't interpret without this encryption key. So I have the key to encrypt it. Then it goes into the vault at the password manager company's computers, and it's stored in encrypted format. So even if somebody got a hold of this file that has all my passwords in it, they can't open it and make any sense out of it without my key. And in this case, my key is that master password. When I go to log in to Facebook, I have my key, so I use my key to pull up the encrypted password, unencrypt it, and then put it into Facebook's login page to log into Facebook. So to get it, so you use the key on both sides, both to encrypt something and to unencrypt it. And it's not usable in this middle form.
Wade, I actually have a physical password manager, but it's a pain because unless I am in the house and in the same room as the manager, it's useless. But it works on the same basis as what you're saying with the master password.
Yeah, there's several variations around password management, and that is one. But you've kind of called out one of the limitations of that one. Whereas with this one, you've got it with you. You can get to it from any device, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But if I'm at a friend's house, or I'm at the library, or I'm at the hotel using one of the PCs in the lobby, I can get to my passwords from any device, as long as it's got a browser I can log into. So or if I've got my phone with me, it's on my phone.
Well, that's why I wanted to take this class, because I wanted to find something that's more useful.
Yeah.
Wade, is there any time you would not use a master password?
Well, if you're using a true password manager, like I use LastPass, there's no way to use LastPass without a master password.
Got it. Thank you.
Now, yeah, that kind of separates this from the browser-based password manager that we talked about. They don't have a master password, so it's much easier to hack into the passwords that Chrome has stored than it is the ones that LastPass has stored, because LastPass uses this encryption process.
How do you remember your master password?
We're going to talk about it a little bit later. We're going to talk about it now since you brought the question up, though, because that is very, very, very important. Because if I forget my Facebook password, I can just click on forgot password, and it will let me change my password and store a new one. With a master password, I'll use LastPass just as an example. My stuff is stored here. My master password is never stored anywhere in LastPass's data center. They have no way to know what it is. They have no way to recover it. So if I forget my master password, I can't use my password vault any longer. I would have to start over and build a new one from scratch.
So what do you do to remember it?
What I recommend that people do is treat this like any other critical document you've got, like the title to your car, or the other secure papers, your will. Put it on an index card, put it in a locked safe in your house, or put it in your vault at the bank. Put it wherever you keep your other secure papers. So if you forget, you can get to it. If you're incapacitated and your family members need to get to your accounts, they will have access to that. I'm assuming they have access to your vault. Certainly, the people
should you make
they
it?
can go and get it.
Should you make it pretty simple so that you can remember it?
Absolutely not, because then it makes it easy for someone to hack into it. So if a cyber criminal hacks into your master password, they can get into your vault. So it needs to be secure. It needs to be something you can remember, but it shouldn't be like my dog is Elsa. It shouldn't be Elsa, or even Elsa 21. That's too easily hacked. You probably need to use the typical secure password where you got uppercase, lowercase, a number and a special digit in there somewhere.
So Wayne, you would have, the individual would have to come up with that password. They don't give you any suggestions?
They do not. They do not.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions. Yeah, so that's, yeah. Let's move on. If there's no other questions around this process, oops. I know this is a little hard to understand. We'll talk a little bit more about it. I think it'll be a little more clear as we go along. But,
Excuse
this
me,
is the
Wade.
key security part.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, you know, if your password is really safe and long enough, and you say put it in the vault, what if you're worried about forgetting it? Like you said, you shouldn't bring your book with passwords around. I would be tempted to bring that number with me. So you're saying you really need to memorize it.
That would be my recommendation, and plus you need to have it so if you're unconscious in the hospital and somebody needs to be in, and your spouse or family member
Yeah.
needs to be able to get into your accounts, you need to have it somewhere where they can get to it.
Okay.
But if you're going to put it somewhere, hide it somehow, put it in a note on your phone, but don't say LastPass master password and then put it in there. Maybe just stick it in a note somewhere and you call it something, you know, but don't make it easy. So somebody,
Okay.
you know, get your phone and they're looking at your notes, you know, that they would
Okay.
recognize it as your master password for LastPass.
Okay.
I have been known to do that. I have mine stored somewhere, but it's not labeled LastPass password.
Okay.
I have mine in the notes section on my phone with a code that only I would know what it stands for, so I can remember it in case I need it.
Yeah,
But I have
that's
it
a good trick.
memorized as well.
Yeah, that's a good trick. So that's you know, that's 99% safe.
I have a question. How long does your password have to be? Because some have, it has to be 7, no more than 12 and whatever. So what is a safe number that you would have a master password so you don't run into that problem? It's too long or too short.
It's going to vary. Well, each one of the vendors, there's a lot of different software vendors that create master password software, and they may have different minimum requirements. They may say it's got to be at least 8 characters and must have uppercase, lowercase, numerical, and whatever. So you'd have to hit that minimum. And if you're hitting the minimum, that's probably okay. Longer is better.
Okay.
But I would say you want
that's what I mean, that like if you have a master password that you thought of yourself, how about if they log into, like, let's say you go into your Macy's and they said you have to, it's supposed to be 20 characters, but your master password says, oh, we only accept to 8. Do you run into that problem?
When you're not using your master password to log into Macy's.
Oh, okay.
You're using your master password to get into LastPass, and then all your passwords are stored in LastPass.
Okay, now I get it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Wayne, oh, excuse me. Let me see.
Bye-bye.
Where do those, oh,
I told you I had a little dog the same size.
oh, what kind of dog?
She's a Bichon.
Oh,
Bye, darling.
Wade, where do those passwords come from that are stored in there? Do we go and make one up for all the places, or?
Well, you probably already have one. So
Yeah.
the first, yeah, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Let's
Oh,
hold that
okay,
question.
sure.
Okay, and I know there's several things popping up here on the chat. Let me just stop and look real quickly before we move on, see if we answered everything. Or if you put something in the chat and we haven't answered it, if you could just go ahead and let's stop for a minute and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Wade, are your notes on this pretty complete or not? Because I know some teachers, I wait for the notes and they're so sparse, I've ended up having to go back and watch the video again and take my own notes. But since this particular class has a lot of specifics in it, are your notes fairly specific, or?
The notes are like most of the notes for the classes, but I've got several attachments that go into this. They're articles that I got a lot of the information for the class from. So I've got multiple attachments that go into a lot more detail.
Okay.
Somebody's talking about using a password protected Excel spreadsheet. That's probably maybe equivalent to using a browser-based password. I mean, it doesn't use a master password. It's not encrypted, so it could more easily be hacked. But it's not a bad way to do it. That's certainly better than a paper and pencil. So it falls between paper and pencil and a true password manager.
Can you explain what you're talking about as far as saving it on a spreadsheet?
You can, if you make an Excel spreadsheet, you can save it with a password. So then in order to open the spreadsheet, they've got to have the password. So that's what I think he's doing.
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, yeah.
And then instead of, I thought that it would defeat somebody had somehow gotten a keystroke logger onto my computer. I thought that it would bypass that by doing copy and paste of my passwords into the sites rather than typing them in. But I've been told by my son, who's much more, he's an IT guy, that that's not the way that the copy and paste function works. So it wouldn't defeat a keystroke logger.
Yeah, probably not. So,
but it would
again,
really help with this class if people would put their questions in the chat instead of just keep interrupting the instructor.
Actually, I would rather have it the other way, to be honest, because it's hard for me to read everything over here. So it will take me longer to read it and then answer it than if I just listen to you ask the question. I'm monitoring time to make sure we get through. But for me personally, I can manage the class better if you just ask questions instead of me having to stop and go and read. Let's move on because we're clocking on pretty good for time right now because we got just a couple other things to go over, and then I want to do the demo. We've covered a lot of things that are in future slides already. So I talked about the gold standard of password management. I want to kind of go over this is sort of the ideal where we really should be. Nobody's there yet probably, but the gold passwords. The gold standard is to have a unique, complex password for each account. So if you've got 200 different sites you log into, you'd have 200 different passwords. That's the part that there's probably nobody is doing, but we should start moving in that direction. Because what happens is, when people break into your accounts, they don't usually hack into your bank account or your Schwab account. They steal your password from Instagram or Facebook or some other site, and then they turn around and use that user ID and password to try and get into other sites. So if you use the same user ID and password to get into Facebook that you use to get into your bank account, that's how it gets compromised. So you want to certainly at least start with having unique, complex passwords for all your financial sites. Any place someone could hack into and get your money, start there. And then work your way out to social media and other platforms. Passwords are all stored in a secure encrypted vault in the cloud. You have a master password that we've talked about to access and unencrypt the passwords. Passwords are available on all of your devices. We've talked about that. So, and since they're stored in the cloud, if I change a password on my laptop, it's immediately available on my desktop and on my phone and on my tablet. So that's the role of the cloud in all of this. This is where my passwords are stored, so I can get to them from any device, as well as my friend's computer at their house. I just log into my password manager from that PC, go to the cloud, and I can get to my passwords. And it works on websites or apps. We kind of talked about this a little bit already, but the question is since that you are storing them in the cloud, they're stored on the internet, not on your device. Is that safe? And using that master password approach that we've talked about makes it safe. There's been very few breaches. LastPass, the one I used, actually had a breach in 2015 where cyber criminals did get into their data center, into their computers. They never even got to the password files, but if they had, those files were encrypted, so they still couldn't have gotten to my passwords unless they had my master password. which isn't in LastPass's data center. So there'd be no way for them to get to my master password. That's really how and why that master password is so critical. So let's talk a little bit about how you would install one of these. I think we've talked a good bit about it. And I think as we talk through this and do a quick demo, it will make some of this make a little more sense. So if you're going to install a master password software package, and there's a lot to choose from, we're not going to go over all the different ones today. That could be another hour-long class. I'm going to send you in the email that comes after class, there'll be a couple of articles that go over all those different password managers, pros and cons, costs. So you can kind of go through and pick the one that you think works best. So you would pick the one you want to use. You go to their website and download the software and install it, create an account, create your master password yourself that you use to log in. And I usually talk about here about keeping it safe. We've already covered that, so we don't need to talk about that. So when you log into a new site, it offers to save your credentials, just like the browser-based password manager does. When you return to that site, it automatically fills it in with your credentials, just like the browser-based. So it does the same things your browser-based password manager does that you're used to. It does some other things. If you have multiple logins for the same site, you can store them. I've got 4 different Amazon accounts. So when I go to Amazon, my password manager asks me which account do you want to use to log in. So you can do that. For example, I've got my account, my wife's account, and then I have a couple of businesses that have their own Amazon accounts. So you can do that. You can have multiple logins. And they almost all have a browser toolbar. That's what this is right here. This is my LastPass. So I could go up here, open a browser window, type in LastPass and get to it that way. But this is just a little quicker, easier way to get there. It's an extension. So that's a feature most of them all have. Makes it easier, and I'll show you how that works in just a minute. So once you've got one there, the biggest trick then becomes getting your passwords into your vault. Somebody asked this earlier. There's basically 2 general ways you can do that. One is basically adding them one at a time, which is actually the easiest way to do it, especially if you're not sophisticated technically. So basically what you would have to do is to turn off that browser-based password manager you've been using. It differs a little bit browser to browser, but I'm using Chrome here. So I would just go into settings. And right here, it calls it autofill instead of password manager. But this is where it manages passwords. So I can click here and it says offer to save passwords, and I turn that off. Automatically sign in, I turn that off. And now I've turned off that browser-based password manager. We don't want to have them both running at the same time because they'll be fighting with each other. Both of them might want to save your password, and both are going to want to fill it. So that's the first step, is turn that browser off. It's similar for Firefox or Internet Explorer or Safari. Typically, you just go into settings and it'll call it password management or autofill, something like that.
Wade, where do you find that again?
Yes.
Where do you find that again?
Click on this triple dot and then come down to settings.
Oh, okay.
And then it's called autofill.
Okay.
And I think it's pretty much the same process with the other browsers. Yeah. So now the first time I've turned that off, so now I go to Facebook for the first time after loading my password management software out there. And if I know what my password is, I just log in, and LastPass will notice that it doesn't have a password for Facebook. So it'll ask, do you want me to remember that password? And I say, yes. It's now stored it in LastPass. Then I go and log into my bank account, do the same thing. If you don't know what the passwords are, you can change it. And in fact, that's a good time to go ahead and replace it with a better password. So in this case, I'd go to Facebook and say forgot password, and it'll let me change my password. I can go in and put a new one in. It'll save that one in LastPass. Either way works. But the advantage of doing it this way is there's no technology involved. You're just basically adding them one at a time as you use that site for the first time. The other way is that most of these browsers, you can go into them and download a file that has all your old passwords in it. And then the password management software has a way to upload that file and populate your vault that way. You've got to be a little more sophisticated technically to do that. And again, it differs depending on which password manager and which browser you're using as to how that would work, but that is a possibility. I usually recommend just doing a load them as you go and take the complexity out of it.
Can I get to my saved passwords? Because I would like, can I copy and paste some of them or?
You can, again, it depends on the browser, but most of the browsers you can, get to that. So it's the same thing where it has your saved passwords. I don't have any, but if you had saved passwords, they would be here. So yeah, you could go in and copy and paste those into a Word document or something. Be sure you don't print it out or lose it, since that's all your passwords. And then you could use them and go and log in one at a time with that. Is another option.
Wade, I have a question. If the two-step authentication is on for different sites, does a password manager can that overcome that, or what does it do with those?
It doesn't interact at all, because it gets to the password, get you past the user ID and password. And then, it's up to that site to then ask you if it's going to send you a code to your phone that you've got to enter. So it can't help you with that part. You would still just get that code on your phone and enter it into the login screen. Now, where it can help you, and I want to go ahead and get to the demo here, some sites make you have secret questions. You can store the answers to your secret questions in your password vault. So if you forget those, you've got them handy. And so I'm going to just briefly mention some of the password managers. Again, I'm going to send you an email with all this information. So, but the ones that are typically the most common ones, we've already mentioned LastPass. I'm going to show you that one. 1Password is one that's very popular as well. And it's typically popular with the Apple people that are all in one Apple. But there's a bunch more. And again, this is all in the email I'm going to send you after class. So I'm not going to spend any time talking about these different ones, as well as Apple Keychain, which isn't quite there, but getting there fast. And there's an article about Keychain as well. I do want to spend the rest of the time we have doing a quick demo so you can kind of see this thing in action to understand what it is and how it works. So here's my LastPass right here. And so if I'm going to log into a site, I just come up here and click on that LastPass icon. And if I want to log into Moodle, which is I teach a class at Brunswick Community College, and they use something called Moodle to manage the classes. I only had to type the first two letters, and it brought up, it starts bringing up sites, but it's right here. So I just click Moodle. It brings me to the login page. I click login. You see this little icon is the same as this little icon. So it tells me that LastPass has a password, and it says one here, meaning it's got one to choose from. So there's only one. I click on this and I tell it to fill. It fills in my username, it fills in my password. I click login and I'm into my site. That's all it takes to get into a site.
Would you not click that remember ID if you're using your LastPass? It gave you the option of remembering your ID.
Yes, LastPass remembers your user ID and your password. Now, I would not have a site automatically remember my user ID. That makes it easier for someone to hack into it. And LastPass remembers it anyway, so I would never turn that one on.
All right.
I mentioned it'll save multiple. So let me go to Amazon where I've got multiple. So I just put in AM. That was enough. Here's my 4 Amazon accounts that I've got. Each one has a different user ID and or password. 2 of them have the same user ID but different passwords. But if I want to log into my normal account, which is this one, I would just click here. It logs in my user ID because it knew that from the one I picked. It makes me, again, tell it which password to use. And I'm using this one, my personal one. And then I sign in. I'm into, so pretty much, it works that way for any site you're logging into. I don't have to have shortcuts and list of, since LastPass knows every site I've got an ID to log into.
Wade, while you were demonstrating, I downloaded the app for my password manager on my phone, and it asked me if I wanted to do the facial recognition or type in my master password. Do you have an opinion on that? Which is
I use the recognition. I use the fingerprints on mine instead of having to put in the master password. I find sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It forces me to enter my master password anyway. But yeah, I figure that's as secure as the master password.
okay?
So yeah, that's what I do. I'll show you that in a minute as well. Let me show you one other thing here, a couple other things here, but click here again. Let's say I'm ready. I'm going in and fixing my bad passwords. So I want to go into Amazon and change my password and to a better one. I can come down here to where it says generate secure password. Click that. This is the password generator. I can tell it how long I want it to be. Maybe 10 is all that I need for Amazon. And then you tell it if you want it, what did you want it to use? And the recommendation is to include all of these uppercase, lowercase numbers and symbols. LastPass and the other managers don't force you to use a secure password. I could tell it, just give me something using only uppercase letters, or I could just sign in using Elsa, the name of my dog. LastPass would take that, so it doesn't force you to use strong passwords. It gives you the opportunity to use them. So if I was using a secure password, this is the password it generated for me. I would just copy this and then go into where it said enter your new password and paste it in there. I would never remember this password, but I don't have to remember it. LastPass remembers it. Probably no one's going to hack into my account using that password. So that's what makes it secure. You notice when I logged into Moodle and I logged into Amazon, I never saw my password. I didn't need to enter my password. I just had to remember my master password, not every one of my 350 accounts I log into. Does that make sense?
Wade, when you said Elsa, what did you mean? And then all these numbers came up.
Oh, no, I said a bad password is like use your dog's.
Oh, okay.
My dog's name is Elsa. So, but I said that LastPass would let me use Elsa for my new password for Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't force me to use a good password, but it lets me use one. It gives me good ones to use.
Okay.
Wade, where would we see a comparison of LastPass and Keychain perhaps to figure out which one to get?
There's articles that be in the email that comes out after class.
Okay, thank you.
Keychain, yeah. That comes up a lot.
Wade, is there a cost for these password keepers?
It varies, and again, that's in the email that I'm sending out as well, but they range from free. LastPass is free. The reason I use it, I'm cheap. It has a premium version, but the premium version lets you do more things. It doesn't make it more secure. And in fact, I'll even say in that article I'm sending you, there's probably 10 different password managers. I would say they all are equally good at saving secure passwords. what they do is they have different add-ons and they just work differently. Some people like the way one works. Some people like the way the other one works. But it's not like one of them is more secure than the others. They are all secure.
Okay, so what I hear you saying then is that a free password manager would be just as secure as one that you're paying for. It's just that the ones you pay for might have additional features.
Yeah, so they'll do things like letting you save documents in there. They're locked and secured. You can put in your credit card numbers. You can put in your bank account
Okay,
debit card number. So you can do lots of things besides just storing passwords.
okay,
That's
thank
what,
you.
yeah, that's what you're
Wade,
paying extra for.
Wade, I'm hesitant to ask this question because it might sound so stupid, but if you have the key, and they can only get into it if somehow they can get through that key, what does it matter what your passwords are in there? Because they can't get in there, right?
They can hack into my account just by trying different, they can go to Amazon or go to First National Bank. And that's what these cyber criminals do. Then they'll just start using hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different user IDs and passwords, trying to get one that hits. So if they've gotten your, and most people now use their email as their username. So what they'll do, if they've got your username, they'll plug your username in and then just start entering passwords until they hit one. And if my password is ELSA, there's a good chance they'll hit it. Their computer will randomly generate that because it uses lots of names and dates and common things people use for passwords. So they didn't get to it through LastPass. They just sat down and started counting them in.
Okay, thank you.
Can you guys?
Good question.
One short question. So I've got like 3 laptops, 2 tablets, and 2 phones. What you're saying is that device works across all these platforms.
That's correct.
My concern is if I use this, what would you say are the relative security of a laptop, a tablet, and a cell phone? In other words, if I can get in through any one of these portals and get to my, learn my master password, then they've got everything, don't they?
No.
If they get your master password, yes. I mean, that's why that master password is so important.
And aren't cell phones uniquely vulnerable to hacking by outsiders without you even knowing it's happening?
Well, even if they hack into my phone, they still got to hack into LastPass. They got to have my master password.
But they can spoof you. They can watch you put your master password in.
That is a possibility. Yeah. It's
I don't
much safer
believe-
than using a browser-based password manager or having it in a Excel spreadsheet but yeah, nothing is 100% unbreakable.
Wade,
Uh-huh.
if I was to say I don't have a password manager, and say if I was to go on the internet to try to get one, how do I know that that's the legit site or not? If you got so many scammers out there that's claiming to be that site, and it be maybe just 1 or 2 words is off, and it's not the right site. So how would I know? Is it
But if instead of following a link, you would just, the safe thing is to go in and just type lastpass.com as opposed to following a link you got in an email or something like that.
Okay.
That will take you to that site.
Okay, thank you.
And we have run out of time. In fact, we're 1 minute from the top of the hour. I ran over a little bit here, but there was such good conversation. I hated to cut it off prematurely, but I do need to go to closing. I think there are a few new people that haven't been through this, just to make sure you know what's going to happen after class, because I mentioned several things around the class. So first, the session is being recorded, and you can request a copy. This is how you request that copy. If you want to go back and watch the whole thing again, or maybe there's a couple of pieces you're fuzzy on, you want to go back and watch again, you can fast forward to that section. You need to send an email to help@getsetup.io. So write that down if you're new to this and don't have that written down. Help@getsetup.io. Send them an email, include the class name and the date you attended it, because they only will send that recording to people that attended the class. If that checks out, they'll send you an email with a link to that recording so you can watch it again.
I just want to confirm that is very handy. I don't do it on every class, but they do send you a link and you can actually download the video. So you've got it on your desktop to watch at your leisure. So
Okay, thanks.
that's
Melinda,
very
for that.
good on something like this.
Yeah, sometimes it is good to go back and watch parts of it or even the whole thing. I referred to this class email several times, so I want to make sure we talk about that. So after class, you'll get a class email. It has several sections to it. There's a way to recommend the class to a friend. You can send them a link through email or Facebook to the next time it's going to be taught. This was the part I've been talking about. There'll be a class notes section in that email. It'll have some key takeaways, but as I think was Melinda was saying, these are fairly high level, but it'll have multiple links to websites. There'll be a link to the website that reviews all these different, in fact, there's 2 different review articles reviewing the different password managers. There's 10 or 12 of them, how much they cost, what they do, comparing one to the other one. So you can do your research and try them out. Most of them have a free trial if they're not free to begin with. There'll also be a link to 3 classes. If you're interested in any one of those 3 classes, you can click that link. It will take you directly to our website where you can register for that class. If you don't get this class email, again, send an email to help@getsetup.io. Say, I never got the email for the password manager class on February 11th. They will get in touch with you, try to figure out why you didn't get the email, get you a copy of the one you missed, but figure out why you didn't get it so you'll get the ones in the future.
And have people check their junk mailbox, because right now I've been working with GetSetup, but all my GetSetup still keeps going to junk mailbox. So it might be there.
That's the first thing they'll probably have you do is check your spam folder and see if it's in there. But if it's going in there, they can usually help you figure out how to stop that from happening. But worst case, check your spam folder after class to see. These emails almost always come out within 24 hours, usually within a couple of hours after class.
Right. Click on the message.
Can I make a suggestion? This is really helpful to me when I take these Get Set Up classes. If you have your cell phone available when they're doing these classes, and when he puts up these slides like this that you want to remember things, you can take a photo of that with your cell phone.
Mhm.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Brenda. That's a good way to get this email address and make sure you've got it. Yeah, good suggestion.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. 2 other quick links. I'll go over these quickly. One is just a way to give feedback on the class, rating the session 1 to 5, rating the guide 1 to 5, and that's all that's required. You can also provide comments, which we really appreciate, as to why you gave that rating and any other general feedback you want to give us, especially at other classes. And then the last link is just to take you to our website where you can book another class. So I am 4 minutes over, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I do want to thank you all for attending and for all of your comments and discussion. It was hope you learned something about password managers, and we'll give it a shot. And I hope I see you again in another class really soon. Thanks for attending.
you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye now. Mhm.
You too.
Bye.